We've got Lindsey Love Jenks on the podcast. Lindsey owns a company called Macrostax, which offers customizable nutrition plans without actually having to deal with a one-on-one coach. And she does have a background as an actual nutrition coach, working with clients one-on-one, as well as owning a CrossFit gym in Florida. She went to regionals as an individual athlete as well. But she's sort of taken all that experience and tried to roll it into this organization that offers this broad, scalable coaching nutrition piece for people without actually having to work with all of them one-on-one, which is a very interesting little hole in the market to find, right? Where there's applications that just track your food, there's expensive nutrition coaching, but I think a lot of people are really looking for something in between. So Lindsey has built this product, and we have a pretty good discussion here about a lot of the challenges of leading a technical team as a non-technical founder, figuring out how to take feedback from users and give them what they need rather than what they say that they want. And then also we kind of dig into a lot of the dangerous psychological traps that CrossFitters can fall into with their nutrition, whether if they're trying to compete or if they just want to look good and feel good. Some pretty silly stuff that people do out there, and anyone who's coached for a while gets to see a lot of it. So listen to find out more about Macrostax and also to sort of understand this hole in the market that Lindsey is trying to fill. I think one of the things that I think is interesting about what you're doing is that, you're sort of trying to move from this more like high touch, individualized coaching type of thing into something that's like more accessible, right? That's, I think that there's Peter Diamandis has some thing about like democratization and like demonetization or whatever, where it's like you can digitize something and then make it cheaper and more accessible. And that there's kind of a trade-off there as far as like, actually coaching someone versus creating something that's more accessible for a large group of people. So why would you do that?
What I think's really cool though is it does open up the opportunity to coach in different ways. Yes, it's more accessible, right? It's cheaper, so we can reach more people. So I was generally doing, one-on-one coaching, nutrition coaching for $150-ish a month. And some people wanted to pay that and they got good value out of it. Other people are hesitant because of their price tag. So they're like, I don't want to do that on top of a gym membership, right? And I was just like, we got to reach more people. There has to be a way that I can monetize this thing. So that way, I'm still giving valuable information to people who want it. And then there's always the ability to upgrade, to more of a personalized approach, I guess. So just figuring out a way to bridge that gap. So people get a little bit of help. And if they want more, you can either charge them more or you can give it to them for free. It's up to you. So it's just kind of bridging the gap between, free online sites and templates and information and then expensive one-on-one coaching.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that a point that you brought up that, anyone who's in the sort of fitness business has to think about is like, people aren't just paying for your service and you're not just competing in the landscape of fitness services with like other nutrition coaching options. It's like, okay, cool. If someone is paying a CrossFit gym membership and for individualized programming and for knee sleeves and a special jump rope and, a $70 bag of protein and like a collagen supplement, and, some sort of like, because they have adrenal fatigue and then they need some other supplement. It's like, these people are potentially allocating, over $1,000 a month to like random different things. And there's not necessarily space for everything. So it's like, where can you sort of create value that's actually, worth it for people to add on to that additional expense?
Right. And stick to for a longer period of time. Because I was finding that, some people would invest, but it would be for a short period of time. It's like, okay, well, now I need to cut back on my expenses so I can have more personalized jump ropes.
Yeah.
So this is also another way to keep people kind of doing it long term,
Yeah. So what, that's another interesting point. So people with nutrition coaching are probably more prone to wanting to dig in deep for 1 month or 3 months or something like that. And then kind of like go into a more, like maintenance phase. Is that sort of how they approach it? What does that look like?
Basically people will sign up. They want to learn a lot in the beginning, and then they feel as if, okay, I have a good idea. Now I want to transition into something like you use, into a more of like a maintenance, but maintenance would just be like maintaining on their own, not necessarily maintaining weight. But I also found, because my clients would say, well, I'm not really ready to do it on my own, but I don't necessarily need to be checking in with you every single week and paying $150, So like, how do we bridge that gap? How do you give people a little bit? So with Macrostax, we have a live chat with inside the app, the web app. And so that way people can access a nutrition coach at any time, but it's just like up to them to like ask for questions. It's not like a scheduled check-in where you get linked with, one specific coach. So we found that's worked really well.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense that, you sort of get this large upfront coaching situation where you kind of learn, okay, like, here's what I need to do. Here's how I need to do it. Here are the potential pitfalls I'm going to have. And then at some point, you don't need as many touch points, but you do, still need some sort of coaching or structure to what you're doing. It's not just like, okay, I'm out in the world and then I can just still maintain exactly what I need to do. I guess how do people maintain consistency over time? I think that that's something that is also very challenging for folks, especially if they transition away from like a more higher touch coaching environment.
Yeah, consistency is tough, right? I would say at least in the nutrition industry, maybe fitness, but more nutrition is just generally social lives. So if anybody goes out to eat, whether it's with friends, a date, you are just wanting to try something new, or you have alcoholic beverages, or you have a party, or whether it's your kids or it's, a girls' night out or something like that. People really struggle with consistency when they have these things pop up in their life that they really enjoy doing, vacation, camping trips, stuff like that. So that would be probably the number one reason that we get, how do I stay on track, while eating out at restaurants, while having a social life, and not feeling like I have to give up everything, in order to make that work. That definitely is number one.
And what do you tell people there? Because I think that there's probably two, issues at play, right? One is just the enjoyment of the actual thing, right? Where it's like, I really love, getting a Papa John's pizza on Friday, and it's just my favorite thing in the world. As well as some people don't even like the things that they're doing when they're in a social situation, but they just feel pressure to actually do it, and they don't feel comfortable being like, no, I am not going to, drink this beer, or I'm not going to eat this cake or whatever. So how do you coach people to, figure out what the balance is for them?
Yeah, starting with their goals. So I always ask people, tell me what, your top 3 goals are, right? And sometimes you have to lead them a little bit. But if somebody has to lose weight in order for them to have quality of life, right? Like they are overweight, they've been like this for a long time, it's hurting all the relationships around them, and that's like their number one goal because they know that's like what's going to help them, then I would say that they're going to probably have to say no to some of these things if they're not able to resist temptation, right? So if somebody's or if their doctor told them to, lose weight or something like that, if somebody is in this like, yeah, I'm just like doing it for performance. I'm okay with like a few setbacks here and there. And then I always like preach, moderation is key. And, you don't have to go overboard. You can go out and have 1 drink or 2 and stop, or you can have 2 slices of pizza versus an entire Papa John's pizza. So moderation definitely like doesn't hinder you in the long run. Most people need to find that balance between, indulging a little bit and having a plan going into it, saying like, okay, I know that I won't feel guilty if I have 2 beers, right? And then stick to it. And then the next day they're like, cool, I only had 2 beers. I feel good about myself. I'm ready to tackle my nutrition plan. And, they don't have all this like guilt and backlash.
Yeah. So it's sort of giving them like a set of rules that they can comfortably follow, right? Because it's really dangerous, I guess, when people feel like they're failing, that they tend to kind of, lash out or just like completely go off of their plan when they're like, oh, I screwed up by having 2 beers. So fuck it, I'm going to have 15.
Right.
What about the social pressure aspect? Because I think that that's something that, I personally can struggle to empathize with because I have a variety of social problems that, it can be positive in the sense that I do feel comfortable being like, no, I'm just not going to eat this birthday cake. But I know for a lot of people that's very, very difficult. Have you seen anything that's helpful for helping people with that type of problem?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That gets more into like the psyche, where, like, what is it that they're struggling with? Is it because they want to impress somebody? They maybe have addiction issues. It's usually like some sort of underlying problem where they don't have confidence saying no. Right. So I think it'd be like figuring out what that is, like what's holding these people back from being like, no, I have these goals. I have this plan. It might sound weird to you, but it's important to me. I always tell people, like, make sure you surround yourself with, real friends or family that's supporting you and not going to kind of look at you with the side eye if you decide that you want to be strict when you're out.
Yeah, that makes sense. That the friends and family are not always helpful in terms of, accomplishing a nutrition-based goal, that they can sort of undermine you in a way that isn't necessarily even, they're not thinking about it. They're not trying to be like a bad influence, but it can be very difficult to, change your behavior if you have other people around you who are going to look at you strangely if you decide to do something different.
Yeah, and generally those people have insecurity issues as well. So recognizing that, like, if somebody makes fun of me for wanting to, count my macros for whatever reason, it doesn't matter where I am, it's definitely not, it's definitely their issue. You know what I mean? And I recognize that like right away, but it takes a really long time to get to a point where you're confident enough to be like, it's not me, it's you. Oh, well, this is, I'm going to do this anyways, sorry you feel that way or whatever. Maybe even just talking to them about it, saying like, hey, this is just what I'm going to be doing for the next however many weeks or months or forever. So like it or don't type deal. But that's easier said than done, definitely. Especially if it's like somebody really close to you, like a husband or wife, right, that you live with or your roommate, that makes it really hard. And I definitely have quite a few clients that have a hard time because their husband is not on board. So that's a real struggle.
Yeah, especially if you're potentially sharing meals together.
Yeah.
Where, like, if one person is like, I'm going to weigh all this food that we're cooking. The other person is like, no, you're not. Like, I'm not doing that. Or even just like having stuff around, right? Where if you like can't resist, I don't know, Triscuits or something, and you don't want Triscuits around, but a person who you live with has them around, then that's a pretty difficult situation to handle, I suppose.
Yes, and that happens all the time. It's usually the part B that you just said is generally what it is. Like, they're like, maybe they're even supportive. They're like, yeah, do your own thing, weigh your food, whatever you want to do. But like, I'm not going to not bring home Triscuits. Like, you're going to have to just. So finding that balance is tough. And then a lot of times, like, the family member or roommate might say, like, I don't like the meals that you're cooking either. Like, they want something more delicious, which obviously might have like more fat and carbs and, things like fried foods or whatever. You never want me to bring home wings anymore. And that definitely can make it very, very difficult. And I am still learning how to kind of coach people through that.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't know, one of the more challenging aspects of human behavior, right? Is not just getting the person who you're potentially coaching to buy in and understand what you want them to do, but then, you have to potentially equip that person to deal with someone else, or even teach that person how to communicate with someone else surrounding what they're trying to do. And that's like, it's like a game of telephone. The further out you go, it's like, oh, this is going to get harder and harder and harder.
Yeah, sure.
So with Macrostax, I mean, I think that you mentioned earlier that one of the big holes that you see as far as like nutrition coaching is the sort of in between spot, right? Where there's a lot of like free options for people to like quickly calculate their caloric needs on a daily basis, right? Anyone who knows how to use Google can find the Benedict Harris equation and get some calorie numbers and throw some stuff out there as far as like meal planning. And there's also this sort of like high end coaching with individualized check-ins and, we're going to talk through your specific issues and all that sort of stuff. But that the space in between, right, is mostly occupied by kind of like templates and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, what for you, I guess, is the vision for how Macrostax kind of fits into that middle ground?
Yeah, sure. Well, I just saw a hole there, right? Because I'm thinking, okay, well, not everybody needs or can afford this one-on-one individualized, but they really want to feel like that's what they're getting, or have somebody to reach out to. And there just wasn't a lot of people in the space. Like, templates are great, and I think there's a place for them, but there is no interaction with anyone. It's just, you buy something, it's static, and if you have any questions, you're kind of screwed type deal. So with Macrostax, it's cool because you get this whole plan and it's super dynamic. So if your goals change, if you get injured, God forbid, or something like that, and you need to adjust something, you can do that and you don't have to pay more money. And then, like I said, there's a live chat. So you have access to a real person, a nutrition coach. I live behind the chat mostly, and our marketing manager, Bria. But, we answer questions for everybody who just has basic stuff. And we definitely want to hold that at high value. So you're not going to be like just talking to a bunch of random different people either. Like, as the bigger we grow, like, we'll make sure that you're linked to at least like maybe one of two coaches. So that way, we're still getting to know the clients and it's this personal feel. So I feel like we've done a really good job at bridging that gap at an affordable price. So these chat features are super helpful.
Sure. So I think that one of the things that I see with templates, like you mentioned, there's definitely a place for it, right? Some people can do extremely well on the template. But I see two major gaps. One is just the ability, like you mentioned, to potentially adjust, or if you have like a hard time with consistency or dealing with issues that come up, the template becomes very difficult to follow. And then the other problem that I see is almost the opposite end, right? That people who are like very, very disciplined and are just like blindly following some template without even understanding like why they're doing it or like what should be happening. So they're just like, this PDF is the Bible, and I'm just like, I'm going to nail it every single day. And it's like, you're like not sleeping well, you're performing terribly in the gym, you're hungry all the time. Like, maybe this isn't what you actually need to be doing. So, I mean, I guess, how does Macrostax facilitate someone, I guess, modifying what's going on based upon their situation?
Yeah, a lot of it's the coaching aspect though. So people will say like, hey, this is what I'm going through. Especially like what you just said, I'm not sleeping well, I'm hungry all the time. Like, they can talk to a real person, right? And I'm like, hey, listen, maybe your metabolism's a lot higher, right? So like, let's bump you up in activity level, or, you need to stop cutting and move to a maintenance phase. So there's always like a way around it, but you just might need to consult with somebody, right? That like can make you feel confident in changing your plan. Because generally, if you're signing up for something, it's because you need somebody else to tell you, like, or guide you on what to do because you're not sure. So you just need that extra little bit of confidence that like changing the plan is okay, right? Because templates, it's like you either do it, like it's either do it or don't do it, right? There is no like, oh, switch some things up or change it. It's super static.
Yeah, it's I don't know, like I said, it's just sort of like this, here's the decree from the template gods, and, either follow it or don't. One of the things that I think is really interesting that you sort of done with Macrostax is, I mean, you've built this application, right? But that you are not the person who's actually coding it. So how does that work? Like, what happens there?
It's such a challenge. Oh my gosh, Todd, it's hard. Yeah, I am not a technical person. Luckily, my husband is for over 20 years. So at least I have, people around me I can ask questions. But you just have to hire people you trust. And you, as a founder or somebody like building an application, just really has to be super clear on the vision, right? And lead the technical people in that, because generally the technical people aren't going to be, sometimes they are, like Fitbot they are, but a lot of companies, they're not using the product because it's just a whole different world out there with developers and stuff like that. So if they don't understand what macros are or why they're doing it or what it needs to look like or something like that, then it's your job to teach them, right? So it's a constant struggle though, but I mean, just like anything else, hire people that you trust and lead them in the right direction. But it's very expensive, and it takes a lot longer than you originally think.
So these folks who are actually building Macrostax are not necessarily people who are utilizing the application. So they're essentially relying on you to come in and be like, okay, cool. Like, here's what I need to see. Here's how it needs to work. Whatever. Is that the way the process kind of happens?
Pretty much. I have converted 2 of our developers into macro counters. So there you go. But
have they seen great results?
Yeah, they're like really grateful. No, seriously, that they started working on it. They're like, oh my gosh, I know so much more about food, what I'm putting in my body, what I should be putting into my body. So that was really cool to kind of see the vision of Macrostax, like, transform them in a way. But the other guys, who just aren't into it, that's fine too. They just have to understand, what they're building. And that's my job.
So I guess what do you actually go through to kind of like communicate this to them? Is this a process of like you're drawing a bunch of mock-ups and then you're sending it over, or are they, creating things and then you're sort of testing it and you're like, yo, this doesn't actually work, or like I need this field at the bottom of the screen, or like just trying to break the app? Like what actually like literally happens?
Yeah. So after you get through like the prototype phase, that's like whiteboarding and writing, like penciling stuff down. That's like super early on. That was like 2 years ago. But after that, basically you're saying, okay, based in Macrostax, not everybody does this, but I'm a firm believer in building like what the people want, right? So that's why we have that chat feature. And not only do we coach them, but they also say like, hey, it would be really cool if I could do X, Y, or Z, right? And we hear the same things over and over again, and that's what we'll prioritize next. So then I go to the team and I say, hey, all these people are saying that, they really want to be able to change the number of meals that they're eating in one day. Right now we have it set on 5. So some people want to eat 3, and they should be able to eat 3, right? So then I go to the team, and then a developer or a designer will actually like mock it up, on the computer and say like, hey, is this the vision you mean? Is this how you want it to work? Right. And you can kind of see it. And then we kind of like go through like, yes, no, change this, that sort of thing. And then we hand it off to the developers, and they just build the back end.
And are these people all remote, or are you working with them in person?
Everybody right now is remote, although they are local, so we will meet. Some of them, most of them are local, so we will meet in person, but I would say that they work remotely.
Got it.
I'm trying to change that in the next year, though.
Yeah, that whole remote work thing is a whole separate challenge as well. I know a lot of technical companies have kind of gone that route, but just, for me personally, operating like the gym, seeing how much of a difference it makes to have like regular, consistent, like in-person one-on-one meetings with people. Like it's just the amount of understanding and buy-in that they have to what you want them to do, like just goes through the roof based upon that.
Nothing can touch that. Yeah, so we built this product, and I'm like, wow, people want this. Let's keep building it. And now we're in this point where it's like, okay, no, really, this is like, has gotten, it's gotten pretty big, pretty fast, and it will just continue to grow. So we really need to build like an in-house local team, which is what I'm working on now. It's definitely a lot different hiring developers than it was, as you know, I owned a couple of CrossFit gyms, and it was a lot easier for me to hire coaches than it is developers. They're like special snowflakes.
Why?
Because generally if let's say they went to college for computer science, or they just like learned how to code like right out of it. So pretty much right out of college, they're making more than anyone else. So their demands are higher. Not only that, but they're like allowed to work remotely. They can work whatever time they want. nobody knows what they're doing, right? So people just trust them, right? And so they could like literally do whatever they wanted. I mean, so you really do have to trust them. And I mean, they're super, super smart. But a lot of times, you'll see like they'll be introverts, so it's a little harder to communicate. Not all of them, but like some, that's like the stigma out there. Although my husband's one and he's wonderful, but and so it just makes it like difficult because their expectations are really high, like at a super young age.
So
and like you're at their mercy.
Yeah, sure. So how do you, I guess, compete with, like you said, someone who has an ability to code or a prestigious computer science degree or something like that? It's like, okay, that they have these multiple six-figure jobs with tons of benefits potentially on the table. So how do you potentially convince someone like that to work for not Google?
Right. Well, the cool thing about startups is like so I would say in general, there's like two different kinds of coders, and one, they really like the startup life because it's like fun and it's like this product that's growing and like, everyone's into the same things. It's kind of like CrossFit gyms in a way. And they get to like have like a lot more say, wear multiple hats. Whereas like Google's obviously awesome, but they're also still corporate, right? So, or if you work for like Amazon or like just like a big company, like you're probably working as a coder on like a really small part of this massive thing. And that can get super boring from what I've heard from coders. So like generally like they like this kind of like startup life. They wear multiple hats. It's just like they have more say. They can actually say, hey, we should do this. And I could actually implement it. Like if you go to Google and say, hey, we should do this, like that's just probably never going to happen.
Yeah, so you can sort of speak to, I guess, the agency that they have within the company, as well as the, I guess, the ability to sort of change what they're doing a lot more often, and that's appealing to some percentage of people, and that other people who just want like stability and massive cash flow may not be as open to that, and that's fine.
Yep, exactly. When people are like these coders that work for startups, a lot of times too, like they can be like super interested in like back end versus front end, and then like maybe like switch over. I guess like to relate it to like CrossFit, it would be like maybe somebody who starts off as a CrossFit coach, but then like gets to become like head of the weightlifting section, like, so you can kind of like transfer around a little bit, like within, so you're not just like doing the same things all the time. You can like grow within inside the company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned earlier utilizing, I guess, a chat feature to collect like feedback from clients, right? Like people want this, people want to change the number of meals that they have. People can't figure out how to accomplish, I don't know, this specific task. I guess, how do you filter that type of thing? Because something that, I mean, again, you talked about like being a gym owner, which I don't think we fully mentioned, but you used to own and operate some gyms in Florida. But something that I see with feedback from people is that their suggestions are often terrible, but the fact that they're offering a suggestion can give like a bunch of insight into what they actually want. So I guess, what does that look like for you with an app?
That's funny. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff too. Or you can kind of like infer what somebody's saying, but that can spark some interest on, maybe some ways to like make them happy or to give them what they want, but also like what we feel is a priority, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Do you have an example of something that like maybe someone made a suggestion that wasn't actually what they really wanted, and you were able to sort of take that and be like, oh, okay, we need to change this feature or add this feature or update how this works?
Yeah. Our meal building feature right now, which is super cool, we call it the meal generator. That's like the moneymaker, I guess, of Macrostax, and what separates it from like any other program out there. But we're still building it, so there's obviously going to be some flaws. So we get a lot of feedback on that, and people will say, they want us to tell them exactly what to eat, right, and how much. So we currently do that. But what we have found is that, they also want flexibility, because sometimes they don't want to eat what you tell them to, and they want to go off the plan, but they still want to make it fit. So like, we're in this like in-between phase. So like, we actually listened to them. We built them exactly here. This is exactly what you should be eating. But now they want more flexibility, right? So it's finding like this fine line of like, how much flexibility do we give them? And at what point do we say, this is going to get you the results you're looking for. You can't just do whatever you want and expect to see change, right? Because that's why you came to us, is because whatever you're doing right now is probably not working too well. So just finding that line with our meal builder is like, how much flexibility do we give these people, and at what point do we say, if you follow this, it'll work, type deal.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty insightful example there. I mean, that feature is actually something I had a client ask for almost exactly that recently. So I need to get him on Macrostax, because he's like, do you have a recipe site that has just like a bunch of snacks that I can make? And I was like, I mean, not really. I don't know. And like, I was like, what do you actually want? And like, he was kind of unclear on what he was actually asking for, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that he was asking for almost exactly like the meal generator feature, which is like, okay, I want to eat this much and I don't know exactly what I want.
Right.
Just tell me like some stuff I can make quickly.
Right. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, he would love it then. I mean, it was like, here you go. This is exact. And there is some like, I mean, we're building the flexibility in it. So, but yeah, that's funny, because I don't actually know if people know what they want, right, until you put it in front of them. And so it does make it challenging as a product owner, because you just have to, honestly, you have to just go with your gut and do what you think is going to be best. And if it doesn't work or if people don't like it, you just change it, which is much easier said than done, especially with development.
Yep. As, I mean, I think that anyone who's coached someone at all with nutrition, or like tried to give someone nutrition help, you sort of see them say, hey, like, do you have a meal plan? Like, will you tell me whatever? And, people want that. They have a conception that they want a meal plan. And then when you give it to them, they almost inevitably don't even do it at all. It's not even like, I did this for like 6 weeks and then needed to like reevaluate. It's like, I literally did this never, but I was like begging you for it. So I think that, the meal generator is something that's kind of in between.
Right. Yeah. You can change some stuff. You can say like, yes, I want this, and then click a button to get something new for like the stuff that you don't like. So it's been really cool.
Yeah. So I think that, with that type of product, right, where you have some sort of vision as a coach as to like what people actually are going to utilize, which may not be in alignment with what they say they want, right? That you sort of understand, hey, listen, you're going to tell me you want a meal plan. I know you're not going to do it, but I sort of understand this trade-off between giving you specifics and giving you flexibility. Right, that's kind of like the two things that you're trying to balance with this. What does it look like for you then to try to not just create this, but then actually position it so that people understand that it's something that they should be wanting, even though they may not really recognize that it's something that they need?
Yeah, well, I think anybody who's signing up is definitely interested, right? And then and maybe willing to try it. And I will just tell people like, hey, I always bring it back to the goals. Like, what are your goals? And if your goals are, to lean out, to get better performance, like, you have to do some of these things. This is a good starting point. You don't have to do it forever. I always remind people, too, that everything's temporary, right? People need to, like, ask themselves, like, or you ask them straight up, like, what are your goals, right? And then if you have these certain goals that you haven't met in the past for whatever reason, then you probably need to change something, right? So instead of convincing people, I just do a lot of asking questions, and you try and let them come up with the resolution, because like maybe they do try this meal plan. I mean, meal plans, yes, are another like template. It's static. So that's why I don't want Macrostax to be anything static. We want there to be flexibility so people can have this normal life and eat, you know, certain foods when they feel like it and make it fit their plan. But at the same time, I'm telling people like, hey, yes, you can have flexibility, but there's going to have to be some, like you're going to have to give up some things, right? Like it's not, I mean, I eat egg whites. I don't even like egg whites. My husband like laughs, like he thinks it's one of my favorite foods. I'm like, no, I just do it because it has a lot of protein. It hits my macros and it allows me to eat other things that I enjoy. So there's always going to be sacrifices.
Yeah, egg whites are kind of gross and slimy.
I know. I do it. And you don't have to eat egg whites, but I mean, you know, it allows me to eat cheese. So there you go.
There you go. A perfect trade-off. Eat some slimy egg whites. And then do you prefer slimy cheese as well?
No. No, but I love all cheese. So when I started counting macros and I found out I could eat cheese, I was sold.
There you go. Perfect marketing, right? Count your macros, eat some cheese.
Women love cheese.
Yeah, you can redo your homepage with that, and I think that'll be conversion rates will go through the roof.
Yeah,
it's skyrocketing. So another question I have for you just has to do with, I mean, I guess the the space that you're sort of like targeting. Is your primary goal to work with like CrossFit folks, or is it kind of like broader than that?
Yeah, great question. So we started in the CrossFit space because I'm super comfortable with it. I've been doing CrossFit for 11 years, owned 2 CrossFit gyms, went to regionals 3 times, like super like in love with it, right? So it was like really easy for me to cater to CrossFitters. But then I realized, counting macros is really for anyone. It's just a nutrition plan and to meet you at like where you're at, right? So I would say we cater to people who enjoy any kind of fitness. So whether you're a jogger, Orange Fitness, or Orange Theory, weightlifter, we kind of meet you with where you are. So that's why like there's different activity levels and you'll just choose whichever one is appropriate to you. But we have expanded out of CrossFit like quite a bit, which has been really cool. To see different kinds of people using this and getting results and loving it and, sharing it with their sisters and their friends and that sort of thing. So I've enjoyed expanding.
And do you have to, I guess, do you think about your positioning differently for folks who are involved in CrossFit versus folks who are sort of more just like general fitness enthusiasts?
Not really, no, because it's just, it's just a matter of activity level. I mean, I do know that like CrossFitters in general have this like, hardcore kind of personality, right? Like, type A generally and go-getters and that sort of thing. But I would say, probably people who go to the gym 5 days a week, are similar. They're dedicated. Anybody who's working out regularly is a dedicated person and is a good fit for, a macro plan because of that.
Got it. And then I know that you have a relationship with some high-level CrossFit athletes, right? That do you guys sponsor them, or what does that actually look like?
Yeah, we have. Some of them pay us for consulting, and then other people, Travis Mayer and Alexis Johnson, are our ambassadors. So, they use the product, they count macros and stuff like that. But they're also, sponsored athletes.
Sure. So I guess the question I would have would be, I have no idea if this is true or not, would be related to, I guess, like CrossFit having somewhat of like an intimidating vibe for folks. Mm-hmm. And it's like this weird balance between wanting to, provide this sort of like aspirational story of like, hey, these people who are, genetic freaks, the tip of the spear as far as elite athleticism, et cetera, use our product, which gives trust to it. But then also, you're potentially marketing to people who don't care about being able to do muscle ups or anything like that. And that there's like, I guess like a tricky trade-off to find there. I guess, how do you approach that?
So CrossFitters are, definitely, they're really into like performance and they want to, do muscle ups and tons of pull ups and PR everything. And they are like this kind of like special breed of person. And And that's why we kind of wanted to expand out of it as well, because not everybody's like looking for just like performance, right? Like most people, whether they admit it or not, are looking for aesthetics, changes. They want to lose weight. I mean, let's just be real here. Like most people want to lose fat, so that's why they sign up for Macrostax. And we are branching out of just having, CrossFit Games ambassadors, and we have like Jessie Graff, who's coming on, who's like been in like all these movies, and she's like this, like she's amazing. So anyways, like we're branching out and like trying to get people who are in different sports and even like dance and things like that. So it's just kind of like a different style of person. But generally, a lot of times people who are into fitness also want to, they want to lose weight, but they also want to feel good too, or they're into like overall health. So there's a lot of overlap. But I do think that we have intimidated some people with, having just CrossFit ambassadors, which is, why we've started making this shift. Like we love CrossFit, but we also, just love health and fitness in general.
And I think that, we've seen that with CrossFit headquarters too, where they kind of have, I guess, differentiated the brand of the CrossFit Games from CrossFit as a whole more and more, right? Where they're sort of pushing like the health and chronic disease aspect of CrossFit and trying to keep the more like competitive aspect more with like the CrossFit Games brand.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess with trying to branch out, what's the, have you noticed difference in terms of like feedback on the product from people who are focused more on like performance and CrossFit and things like that versus folks who are, I guess, just more interested in like general weight loss and body composition?
Yeah. The good thing about Macrostax is, so it does help me speak differently to the audience. So if they say, hey, I'm a CrossFitter, I'm going to speak to them a little bit differently if they're like a mom who jogs like 4 days a week. But like we have these different cuts within the plan within Macrostax. And I would say like, like cut 1 is essentially like, hey, it's conservative enough where you can lose fat, but you're also going to improve performance. But then you can like move to cut 2 and cut 3. And so say like this mom, like who really just wants to lose weight, like she might get to cut 3 a little bit quicker. Whereas a CrossFitter, I would say hang out on cut 1 as long as you possibly can. Like if you don't want to see your performance decrease, because at some point in time, right, when you're taking away food, then you're not going to be fueling yourself, for the gym as much. Like that's just a fact, whether people want to believe it or not. Like you can't just keep cutting calories and expect to see, performance increases. So at some point the client has to make up their mind and the decision on, whether or not they want to continue to cut more aggressively and what their goals are. So it always circles back around to their goals. Like, what is your main goal?
Yeah, I think I've seen that a lot with CrossFit athletes, and you sort of touched on this earlier too, where a lot of them have a very, I guess, like confused and nebulous understanding of like how much they actually care about their performance versus how much they care about their body composition, and that I think that they honestly just don't know. Like sometimes I'm like, maybe. I'm like, are you lying to me? Like, what do you actually want? But I think that they actually just like don't have a clear, I guess, differentiation between what they're looking for, that they think it's all sort of the same thing. Right. But it's not, right? That like you said, if if you're dropping calories a bunch, that you're not going to do as well in the gym. Right. And that if you need to add 20 pounds to your back squat, that like, maybe you're going to eat in a way that doesn't make you look as good as you possibly think you should for your Instagram photos.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting because everybody's body like responds differently. But like from a personal standpoint, when I was training really hard, like for regionals, my upper body definitely got like much bigger. I was super lean, but like my body just changed in general. Right. And like I was definitely having to eat more and things like that. And, until you're in it, right. Like people say, oh, I want to do this, but I'm like, I don't know if you do. Because like if you really want to lose weight, like a lot of times it's just deciding, like people, a lot of times I think that they need to get there too, or like start to see, whether they're like, I don't care about performance. All I want to do is lose weight. And then all of a sudden they're like, Lindsey, help me. I'm so tired. I don't want to work out. Like I need coffee. And I'm like, you told me, so until they experience it, it's tough.
Would you say that you became too bulky when you were training for competitive CrossFit?
No, but no, I definitely got my muscles filled out a lot. So
yeah, I mean, I think that also that's a another thing that is kind of confusing to people is that, you know, people will see, like, let's say a regionals athlete or something like that and be like, well, I never want to look like that. And it's like, trust me, like that is just absolutely not going to happen. Right. Like this person
right,
is, yeah.
I know.
This person is training like hours per
I'm
day.
Yeah, that, and it's for years. Like, I'm like, trust me, that is not going to happen. And like, you're going to see so much change, right? Before like you even start to get onto this like muscle, like bulking phase or whatever people think they're going to go through. I'm like, trust me. It's just, yeah. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And that, like, you know, if that does start to happen to someone, right, then they're like, oh no, I'm getting like veins in my biceps or whatever that they're potentially afraid of. You know, like once you get to that point, you're probably more aware of like what you're actually training for, and you can decide if that's like a trade-off that you want to make or not as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. You're not just going to like suddenly be like, oh no, like I've become much too strong. Like this,
right.
You know, like it's a train that you can get off of at some point if you're if you find yourself, I guess, going down that road.
Right. Absolutely. In either direction.
Yeah. So I guess with folks who are somewhat confused about their goals relative to you know, performance in the gym versus just like general body composition change, especially folks who, you know, I think that for people who are actually competitive, that like it's not that they can still have like emotional reactions to things, but that they have a better understanding of like, okay, I'm like actually devoting my life to like getting better at this like dumb exercise sport. But for people who are, you know, more just like pretty good, that they end up much more, I guess, confused about what they're training for. Like, how do you recommend those people sort of like figure out what they actually want?
Yeah. Well, we always start with like, you know, what are your goals, right? Whether they think they want them or not, you know, we have to start somewhere. And then the cool thing about especially like nutrition and changing your body composition, I know everybody wants it now, but we all know it doesn't happen now. So I'm like, hey, let's go down this road, you know, for a few weeks. Let's see how you feel and reevaluate. So it's like, a lot of times people freak out because they're like, oh, I don't know. Like either I don't want to lose too much weight, or I don't want to bulk up, or whatever it is, you know, whatever extreme. And I'm like, trust me, it won't happen overnight anyways. So, you know, we always like try and set some sort of weekly, you know, like whether it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 12 weeks, and say, let's reevaluate after that point. Tell me how you're feeling and that sort of thing. That's why the weekly check-ins with like coaches are really helpful. Or with like Macrostax, if you just like want to reach out to somebody and say like, hey, this is how I've been feeling, you know, what do you recommend? That's why coaches aren't going to go anywhere, regardless of all this technology and stuff like that. Like that human interaction, you just can't mimic on a computer, basically. I mean, you can via chat, but like as far as like actual human being, you know, people just need that interaction.
Yeah, and that sort of touches on one of the questions I had originally sent you, which is that, you know, with this process of sort of like digitizing what actually happens with coaching, you know, at some point, especially as we improve like machine learning and these types of things, that a lot of the things that coaches quote unquote do are going to be potentially replaced by just like a very sophisticated algorithm, right? That can analyze someone's food log and sort of see how consistent they've been and, you know, offer suggestions and that type of thing. So, I guess what do you think the role of the coach specifically is and will be over time as we develop more advanced technology surrounding like coaching types of practices?
Yeah, I actually kind of have a different viewpoint. Like I think it's just tools that are going to help coaches. So there's going to be more jobs. Coaches are going to be better at their job because they have these like machine learning tools, right, that are making it easy for them to analyze. They're going to be able to have more clients because, you know, they have a computer that's basically like spitting out something, you know, with their nutrition plan or their fitness plan, whatever it is. And it's saying this person, executed this over the past 4 weeks, and there's graphs and all this stuff. And it's just going to make them better coaches. So I look at it more as like not replacing coaches, but more as like tools, right? And then there's going to be, like I said, more jobs available because, like, for instance, like I am hiring for customer support, right? But it's also nutrition coaching. So, that job didn't exist before Macrostax, but it's not like this, like, it is behind a chat, but it's a form of coaching, right? So I just think it's going to make the coaches' life it's a lot easier. They're going to be better. They're going to have more data to go off of and then open up more jobs.
Yeah, I mean, once you have, I guess, like sophisticated tools, that a lot of the aspects of coaching that are just sort of like drudgery and like, tedious data entry and all that sort of thing. I mean, I never did this, but at one point people actually had to like write down their food, look it up in like some index, right? And like figure out, okay, how many whatever grams of sweet potato is like this, and like literally calculate macros like that, which seems insane. But that like wasn't that long ago that people were doing that.
No, 2007, true story, is when I started counting macros, and I just looked on the back of labels and literally wrote down what I ate and added it together at the end of the day, like with a pencil.
Yeah, like that's incredible. And that wasn't that long ago, right? Like that's
no.
Like, yeah. So
not at all. So.
So I mean, I guess as we get more sophisticated tools, then the mindset would be that this becomes more accessible, so more people can do it, and then there's also more opportunities for coaches to work with other people based upon, I guess, that connection. So something else that might be interesting then is, what do you foresee as far as like with more access for more people to more coaching? Do you see things going in more direction of like, okay, there's going to be a few big players that are kind of coaching everyone? Or do you think there will be more people, I guess, like involved in the process, kind of like, I guess, throughout the world with their own little hubs of clients?
Probably a little bit of both, but I think that more people are going to have the opportunity to coach now, because I think a lot of times people are intimidated. They don't have the resources, whether it's time, money, something like that. But if we have these tools that make it a lot easier for them, and it's, some of these things are already done, right, or have been done before, and then they can just use it, it'll make it a lot easier for people, to get in that career and have their own little following.
Yeah, like the barrier to entry is lower for both clients and for coaches to actually, I guess, get started with some sort of like process.
Right. Exactly.
And I think that I mean, MyFitnessPal alone has facilitated that like crazy, right? I mean, like we talked about, where before you used to have people like write stuff down and calculate it and whatever, and now it's like, okay, everyone has this app, you can just do it, and you don't have to be sophisticated surrounding how you're doing it, like it just happens for you. And now there's a whole market of people who are able to look at people's MyFitnessPal reports and be like, all right, cool, like I noticed that you didn't record on Saturday. Like, what happened?
Yeah. And what I love about that, or tools like MyFitnessPal, is that they, whether it's part of their mission or not, because I don't know their mission, but Macrostax is like, we want to educate people, right? And so like all of these people, because of this tool, now have a better idea of what they're putting in their body. Whereas before, like nobody's besides Lindsey Love Jenks is going to write down with a pencil, like, what they're eating in a day, right? Very few people. So I think that that's really awesome, because now these tools are super powerful to help the consumer, not just the coaches, but the consumer as well, to be like, oh, wow, I am like way under eating, right? Or way overeating, or whatever the case is. So that's really powerful, because I'm not trying to be cheesy, but that's changing the world. Like it's providing education through a tool, that's easily accessible and cheap or free.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's, I guess, like you said, dramatic almost to say that it is changing the world, right? Because if you think about how many people are potentially, struggling with their energy levels throughout the day, or wasting a ton of mental energy on like shame and uncertainty surrounding like what they're eating, that's just like tons of resources that are not being utilized effectively, right? That like people feel like crap, so they can't accomplish anything, and then they beat themselves up constantly over time, and they're just not maximizing what they could be doing.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, it's like if there's enough people who are able to, access solid nutrition coaching through some sort of digital platform that is accessible, that, each of those individual lives can actually get changed quite a bit just from, not feeling like you're going to die at 2:30 p.m. every day.
Right. I mean, before it was like I was, I might have had like at my peak, I had like 100 clients at one time, nutrition coaching. And with, Macrostax, like, we've had 17,000 or 7,000 at a time. And, just so many more people are like, oh my gosh, like you've literally changed my life. And I don't even know these people, and they're just using the product, but like, because it's accessible to them, it's really cool to see it scale, so I love technology.
There we go. We all do. So I guess with next steps for Macrostax, then it sounds like you guys are focusing on building out the meal generator. Is that kind of your main focus?
Yeah, definitely. So making it a little bit more flexible, like we talked about, but still informative and still telling people exactly, what to eat and when. And then also we are adding a food tracker. So right now, like you said, you mentioned MyFitnessPal. So we're basically pulling that in sometime over the summer, not MyFitnessPal, but our own. And it'll make it just a little bit easier for people to track things that are off of our Macrostax plan currently.
Got it. So it's sort of like a one-stop shop then. Projects.
Yep. Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah. And what I guess what do you need to have accomplished to have that meal generator where you want it?
I think I'm going to be building it for years. So it's definitely not going to be, it's just going to get better and better every single week. So we just like take it one thing at a time, like, start small and say, hey, how can we improve this? And every week, just keep improving it, really like anything else.
Yeah, and that process of seeing people use it and listening to what they say and maybe not fully trusting them, but...
Yeah, it helps prioritize things for sure. And honestly, I have had some people with some brilliant ideas. So, there's that too.
There you go. And then do you give them like an equity share when they suggest something like that?
No, not unless they either build it or pay for it.
There you go. All right, cool. So I guess if someone wanted to get started with Macrostax or find out more about it, or you and what you're up to, what should they do?
Yeah, so we have macrostax.com, and then Instagram is...
Wait, how do you spell Macrostax?
Macrostax. One word.
Tricky.
I love that name, but which we rebranded. So anyways, we have Instagram and then Facebook, same thing. It's all /Macrostax. We have Pinterest, which has been really hot lately. So we have like our recipes on there and motivational quotes and our before and afters. I do a ton of YouTube videos. So like how to, like for instance, how to calculate alcohol while counting macros. So you can go to our YouTube channel. Yeah.
Sounds great. I've never been on Pinterest. Should I check it out?
Oh, really? Yeah. I think it's more like female dominant, but like it definitely has like a lot of resourceful stuff. It's just more like picture type things. So if you're into pictures, but people love it for the recipes and like the motivational quotes and like the before and afters. So it's been growing lately, which has been kind of cool to see because I've never used Pinterest for any other of my businesses. So
interesting. Is Pinterest like your main, I guess, like social hub for Macrostax?
No, I would say Instagram is definitely number one. But really we share a lot of the same stuff. So just a lot of like cross platforms, that sort of thing.
Got it. An omni-channel strategy.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thanks for listening all the way through.
I admire your grit, your persistence, and your perseverance. Since you made it, I have a few favors to ask of you. Go ahead and open up the show notes on whatever podcast player you use. In there, you'll find links to all the resources that were mentioned throughout the show. There's also some links there in which you can leave a review or subscribe to the show. And podcasters are always harping on this because this actually makes a difference in terms of the algorithms that recommend podcasts to new people. So if you do that, it helps more people find the show. And if you head over to toddneef.com, you can sign up to receive most of my thoughts and writing, which really only go out to the email list. A lot of it never makes it to the blog or the podcast. So if you like what I have to say and you want to see some of my recommendations and stuff that I've been checking out, go ahead and subscribe to that email newsletter as well.